The Black Diamond Trophy will stay in Morgantown and into perpetuity, possibly, because another game between West Virginia and Virginia Tech, the rebirth of this rivalry, not on the schedule. But West Virginia won the battle in Morgantown last year, and they win the game in Blacksburg, Virginia this year, and they do it in impressive fashion eventually. West Virginia getting a 33-10 win, a sluggish start, a lot of penalties, an ugly game in the first half, that strike for a touchdown from JT Daniels to Sam James at the end of the half. That kind of set the tone for West Virginia. Their offense finally clicked. Virginia Tech could just not do nearly enough. The pick six at the end seals it, which is kind of poetic justice for the way West Virginia has lost the two big games they've lost this year, with the critical interception return in the backyard brawl, and then, of course, the game ender against Kansas in overtime. They get one in their favor, the first actually for that secondary and defense. And then again, Virginia Tech could just do nothing on their own, and Grant Wells in no way made West Virginia regret not recruiting him out of high school. A West Virginia product, a West Virginia kid, former fan of the school, had to go to Marshall, now at Tech, hates West Virginia now. Makes sense he would hate West Virginia now, but he's really going to hate him after this game. I'm Mike Asti, and again, the Mountaineers now 2-2 on the year. Is this a big win for Neal Brown? We will discuss that here on this particular show, because that's not a guarantee. Obviously, it's a win, a much needed win, and the way you do it, you have to feel good. There's good vibes now around the West Virginia football program that haven't been there, and the win over Townsend didn't really create enough of those, with that being an FCS team. But this is not a ranked Virginia Tech team like it was a season ago when they were 15th in the country and West Virginia picked up the win. That then saw Tech lose 5 or 6 the rest of the way, including the bowl game, to expose themselves as not really that good. This Tech team also not really that good, and already has suffered a bad loss to start the year against Old Dominion. So what does this really mean? We will discuss that. We will analyze and recap this game, our instant reaction here, and then segue on to what is going to be a tough schedule for the Mountaineers. Already seeing here in the chat a lot of let's go, a lot of good vibes, as I said, for West Virginia amongst Mountaineer Nation. Many of you maybe are also Steelers fans. We cover the Steelers too, of course. I've covered the Steelers for years. They didn't have the best of days, so maybe you're happy only one of the two games you watched on this night. Maybe where were your allegiances lying? Were you watching more West Virginia or more of the Steelers if you're a fan of both teams? And certainly Pittsburgh Pro Sports Team, common for West Virginia fans to be fans of, but many of you are not. Many of you just West Virginia fans. That's all you care about. And on this night, you got to be happy because, again, you saw the offense get over some hiccups, whether it be the wind or whatever it may have been, whether it be receivers dropping balls. I got flack, and I stand by this. JT didn't look good for the first quarter and a half. He normally puts the ball where only his receiver can get to it. I saw balls where the other man certainly could have got to it, and he was lucky there weren't interceptions and a lot of problems. You saw the early fumble. West Virginia felt like they were getting there in their own way and biting themselves in the you-know-where early in this big game. Wouldn't be shocking. Certainly, we've seen that story before when it comes to West Virginia and even this year's team, but they were able to regroup. Second half adjustments worked. That's something that I've been critical of Neal Brown for. Certainly, you can go to the Kansas game. It appeared they were worse in the second half of the game. It appeared certainly defensively they were worse, and the Kansas could have kept on scoring. And I think if that went 9 or 10 quarters, Kansas would have kept on scoring and kept on scoring. So West Virginia's defense really did lose that game. But in this one, you don't have only one punt. This is a worse day for the West Virginia offense, okay? Can't hate on it. They won, and JT eventually did play well. He threw some really money balls and showed you why he's going places, or at least has a chance to go places beyond college ball if he can stay healthy. But not the best of day for the offense. They played really well against the Jayhawks. That might have been their best day of the season. They didn't win that game because the defense didn't show up. 5 sacks against Pitt, a sack and a half for Dante Stills, and 6 tackles. Pretty much nothing. Only 1 tackle against Kansas the week after, ruining the positivity of that close loss against a ranked team on the road, and you actually covered the spread. This, another road matchup for West Virginia, but Virginia Tech not as good as Pitt. West Virginia actually favored in this game, probably because of that, even though Lane Stadium, quote unquote, a tough place to play. But let me tell you, the last couple of years, the record's not been good for Tech at home. And the mystique of Thursday night, Lane Stadium, Blacksburg, Metallica, Enter Sandman, all of that didn't scare anybody, okay? It doesn't scare you the way it maybe did when Michael Vick was quarterback for the Hokies. And I don't know what he said to the team ahead of time, but that didn't work either. Feel free to chat along. Feel free to ask questions. Now, after the Kansas game, this chat just went through the roof, and this was lit here in terms of engagement and chat activity. I guess these wins don't make you as needing to talk to me and tell me, your thoughts here. JT Daniels does finish with a spread of 20 for 30, 66% passing. So again, that's solid. He's always accurate. 203, a touchdown, no picks, though, rating of 134.5. Can't say it's a bad night, but again, I saw an off JT Daniels by his standards early in this game, and I do believe that when we talk to him at his weekly presser, at the team's weekly presser, I'm going to assume JT will be there amongst the players after Neil Brown and coaches. He will admit that. He will say that. He will give you dumb mistakes. We weren't perfect. We could have been better. We're lucky to win. Certainly on the offensive side of the ball. So JT and West Virginia get the win. He gets his first Black Diamond trophy. The team successfully defends. They get their second in a row. Neil Brown gets his second. And yeah, it's the only trophy game of the year. And who knows about the postseason and what bowl game they might be in, and if they can salvage this season and get enough wins and maybe clip off some W's in conference play. And, they have the one loss, but we'll see the rest of the way in terms of what they can do in the Big 12 for bowl game potential. And hey, we're early in the season if they're going to look for a Big 12 championship, even though that's rough when you already have one conference loss. You got to feel like that Kansas loss is still going to haunt this team. They played so well offensively, so poorly defensively. They still could have won as bad as they played. Kansas is better, but God, should have been a win for West Virginia. Even if they crawled out of it with a victory, we would probably eventually forget. But you can't when it is an L on the scoreboard. And that's a conference loss. That's conference standings. We'll see where they lie. But if they're one peg down where they should be, if they're in a worse bowl game than where they should be, if they somehow have 5 wins instead of 6, if they have 6 instead of 7, 7 instead of 8, you're going to go there. You're going to go there. And it's going to be hard to debunk it. If we have any questions here, I'll certainly answer them. We certainly can talk back and forth. If not, I'll kind of probably wrap up my thoughts here soon to wrap up our coverage. But again, the Mountaineers do get 33-10 in terms of their victory over Virginia Tech. And moral of the story, to me, Virginia Tech is just not that good. Virginia Tech is not that good. Virginia Tech flat out sucks. They're not good, okay? Every year they're overrated entering a season. A little bit less this year than in recent seasons. Maybe we finally learned our lesson. But they're just not that good. Neil Brown made the excuse of Old Dominion and that being a tough situation for them. And all those kids are all excited. And I get it. But you still shouldn't lose. And regardless, okay, you lay that egg. They weren't even in this game once the second half hit. The only reason why they weren't down 3 scores at halftime is because West Virginia was killing themselves, whether it be penalties or the turnovers or whatever else you want to say, missed balls and drop passes by the receivers. So West Virginia could have been up by more at halftime. They could have won this game by more. And actually, I said on Mike Fakovkin and my show, because he actually thought West Virginia would win by a couple touchdowns and was pretty positive about the Mountaineers in this game. I pushed back and thought WVU would win, but it would be a closer game, and it'd be more what the spread says, and it would be that rivalry game. I didn't think they'd blow the doors off anybody. I was wrong. West Virginia blew the doors off Virginia Tech. They showed that Virginia Tech, okay, they might suck, but we're way better than you, and maybe we shouldn't have lost to freaking Kansas, and this is maybe who we really can be. You go to Louis Riddick's commentary, West Virginia fans are going to roll their eyes because he's a Pitt man, but he honestly does usually call a game pretty fair. Obviously, he is a Pitt fan. And I didn't hear the backyard brawl because I was at Acrisure Stadium covering the game, and I was not in Blacksburg due father, so it's a bit rough to travel on the road, but we do have our stringer there with Mitchell Northam, who was covering it for us there for WVU Sports Now. So go find his game recap over there on our site, as well as the rest of our coverage, post-game pressers on our West Virginia Sports Now YouTube channel, as well as WV Sports Now. But he said that West Virginia is a really good team. Forget the record, they're a really good team. They have a high potential. He seems pretty high on this team, despite, of course, being a Pitt guy. And he's only seen the game against Pitt and the game against Tech. So it's 2 rivalry games, getting really up for them, obviously, and eventually did play well in both games. Now, against Pitt, you, of course, have a situation where you get killed off of that late game interception. The 4th and 1 call can suck for you. And then the controversy at the end, you kind of blew the situation that you had there for many, many different reasons, really. And of course, the Kansas game just was a just horrible night all the way around, certainly defensively. And TC and in Towson, you chalk that up, it's FCS. But it's hard to say because Virginia Tech is just not a good team. Virginia Tech is just not a good team. So, hi from Los Angeles. I do appreciate it's a little earlier for you, not as late as I'm having to host this, but we'll see. I'm certainly going to get done before midnight here on the East Coast. So, hi from Los Angeles, Mountaineer Nation all over the place. I'd imagine that you have some connection to be a fan there. Under pressure, he sucks. I also do see some talk here about Mitch Trubisky. We do have our coverage over there for our Sports Now Network over there at Steelers now. Alan Saunders and Nick Farabaugh there in Cleveland. Obviously, a rough night for the Steelers, a rough night for Mitch Trubisky. We'll see if Kenny Pickett's the guy moving forward. But I don't think, by the way, to give this to you, because I covered the Steelers for many years, I can give you these Steelers takes, even though this is a West Virginia show here, a WVU postgame show. I don't believe Kenny Pickett's going to solve all the problems on his own. This is a rookie. There'll be growing pains there. I'm not saying don't throw him in because he's the future, and what are you doing with Mitch right now? Now that it hasn't gotten any better. I wanted to give him this week, but it hasn't gotten any better. And you do have a tough schedule coming up after the Jets game. But in all honesty, again, Kenny Pickett's the future. He could be very, very good. A lot more problems on that Steeler offense than just Kenny Pickett. A lot more. You add him there, there'd be rookie growing pains, and that doesn't guarantee anything gets fixed. So just want to give that to you. Again, any more questions, though, we're going to have those be about West Virginia and this game against Virginia Tech as they do defend the Black Diamond Trophy, winning it 33-10. They played on national TV as well as the Steelers, WVU on ESPN, the Steelers over there on Amazon Prime or wherever maybe you had to watch locally. So glad to have Mountaineer Nation all over the place. A lot of let's go, a lot of happiness, a lot of excitement in this chat. And of course, the mixture there of Steeler fans who are down, maybe also Mountaineer fans, though. It's rare to have both on the same night if you do share them. Can't even remember the last time we had Pitt in West Virginia on this or Pitt in the Steelers on the same night either. So even having that local connection is interesting here on the same night for fans who maybe share their fandom, of course, on that pro side. But back to West Virginia, the question, I guess, is, does this make you feel better about this team moving forward? Does this make you feel better about a tough schedule ahead? Does this make you feel better about salvaging something out of the season, leaving that Kansas loss alone? Because it's going to suck. It will still sting at the end of the year. It will mean something bad for you at the end of the year. That's just being real, but it also can't be changed. It's just out there. So is this a good win? Does it make you feel better? Or do you think Virginia Tech is just a really, really bad team, maybe even worse than last year? Because, again, they got exposed. The Hokies got exposed after that loss to WVU last year, and that was a much closer game. The Mountaineers eventually almost blew. Virginia Tech is a good team. We just need more time to get our game together. So I'm going to agree and disagree. I don't think Virginia Tech is a good team. Didn't think they were a good team last year when they were ranked 15th. Okay, I know this is a new regime again with Brent Price. You got to give him time, unlike last year. And it's cupboard bare, kind of like Neil Brown in year one, with the cupboard being bare, kind of a mulligan for him. I don't think any Tech fans are going to be looking for him fired after losing this rivalry game or even this 2-2 start for them. I get it. But they're not a good team. I mean, where are they going? You're looking at a mediocre bowl game at best. How many wins are you going to get? Again, I don't see Virginia Tech being a good team. They didn't look good in this game at all, and maybe in the first half, but they were getting lucky at times. West Virginia, again, killing themselves. They should have been up by way more. I'm not going to say Virginia Tech is a good team just because West Virginia got a big win, and they needed the big win, and you want to claim something for Neil Brown in this program this year. It's a win. They had to win it. Neil Brown certainly, I'm not looking at Gatorade being dumped on the man. This isn't a ranked team they were playing, unlike last year. But, hey, it's a win. I don't think Virginia Tech's a good team, though. Technically, it wasn't your rival game. That's usually UVA, first off, and I can't believe we're going to go here. You can have more than one rival in college football, guys. Teams do. I'm not saying UVA is not also your rival. That's an in-state game. I get it, but look to Pitt. Pitt obviously has the backyard brawl with West Virginia. They're also natural rivals with Penn State, even though they don't play all the time. To say that they're not rivals with one of the two because you only can have one is just ludicrous. Virginia Tech and West Virginia are rivals. Look at the game, look at the gameplay, look at what fans are saying, look at social media, look at entering the game, look at the hype, look at the rockin' atmosphere. And I get it's for every game. I get you do it well down there at Lane Stadium. But to say West Virginia now is not a rival to you, who's now beaten you back-to-back seasons, by the way, this year pretty handily, and outside of the Michael Vick era where he was 2-0 and had the comeback win and then the big 300 total yard day in his second season, 2000, West Virginia has been able to do well when this game has been played. And we're not talking school to school, but football to football, they're rivals, okay? It's not Pitt, West Virginia. I mean, Pitt's more of a rival to West Virginia than, say, Tech is. If I got to rank it, I would say Pitt 1, Tech 2, and we can argue all day on the West Virginia perspective if Maryland's a rival at all, because there's no big moments of that rivalry to even think of, but there's some geography there, so some want to connect to it, but people that aren't from that connection of geography don't care about Maryland. Say someone in Pittsburgh, they're not going to care about Maryland if they're a West Virginia fan like they would if there's a geographic connection. But people from Pittsburgh, from New Jersey, from Florida, from California, from Texas, if you're a West Virginia fan, you hate Virginia Tech. Okay, same thing with Pitt. And I don't know if Virginia Tech has fans that hate West Virginia from all over the country. Maybe there's more West Virginia hatred to Virginia Tech than vice versa. But to say it's not a rivalry now is a bit asinine. It is a rivalry. It doesn't have to be your number one rival, but it is a rivalry. And by the way, UVA is nothing to brag about in football 99% of the time. So if you want a little rival that's basically a basketball school that once every 30 years does something of note in football, okay, you can maybe win that occasionally. But West Virginia is it's the 15th winningest program in college football history, even though they're down and out right now. That would be a better rival for you, even though they're not in conference. Who knows about the future if they ever get in the ACC? But again, I'm not predicting that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but who knows? They certainly are rivals in the past in the same conference. But I'm not going to go more on that. It's just ludicrous to try to argue that these aren't rivals now after the game has been played. I could go all day on West Virginia's scheduling here. They get this win, but 2 out-of-conference rivals on the road in the same year. I get you scheduled it years ago. I get it's not Neil Brown, but Lord, next year they start at Penn State. That's just not easy for West Virginia. So they're big. 3 years in a row. They're going to have non-home games against out-of-conference rivals. Maryland, and we just talked about whether or not they're one, but okay, we'll say they're rival for the sake of this. Pitt in Pittsburgh, and then, of course, at Penn State next year. That's not the easiest sled when you have a tough situation in conference, too. There's a reason why Alabama doesn't do that. And, yeah, they played one this year against Texas, but there's a reason why teams don't do that all the time. It'd be one, not two, in terms of out-of-conference quality opponents if you have games that are tough in conference. Like Alabama has tough SEC games against ranked teams every other week in conference. So they schedule maybe one tough game out of conference every year, not two. But West Virginia fortunate to win this one. They didn't win the Pitt game. Kansas should have been a win, but it wasn't. They're improved, but it's still really, really bad. And then, of course, Townsend, WVU now 2-2 after a successful defense of the Black Diamond Trophy in Blacksburg. Anything else there? Because I'm not going to argue. Obviously, Virginia Tech and West Virginia are rivals. Maybe it's up to fan interpretation a little bit here, but I don't think so. Not maybe for again, West Virginia and Maryland, I'll give you that. It's not up fan. West Virginia and Virginia Tech are rivals here. I can't believe that's what we're talking about right now. It's like your team loses and you're spending 20 minutes trying to argue that the team that just basically kicked your butt isn't a rival to you now. Does that make you feel better? Your program's more down and out than West Virginia, and West Virginia fans are not in any way excited about the program. Virginia Tech hasn't been a national contender in a decade, no matter what their preseason ranks are. I didn't think I'd bring the fire here, but telling me it's not a rival is going to bring that out. That's just crazy. I'd feel a lot better about that win if we didn't need those 2 penalties to get our last offensive touchdowns. Again, that's something. 20 minutes is an exaggeration there, but I get it. But that's something, again, and I want to kind of get at that too. And I'm not going to spend all day on this show because we don't got enough chat activity here. We got more post-game covers to wrap up. I'll try to do more here throughout the week and certainly going into the next week and the rest of West Virginia's schedule. I'll have another program with Rasheed Marshall in all 3 phases, I believe, a week or so from now. And we'll touch on, obviously, what happened here as we tried to preview it with him and then going on from there. But again, a tough schedule coming up for the Mountaineers in conference, for sure. Baylor, even Texas, not going to be easy. TCU won't be easy. They basically can't beat Texas Tech anymore. Kansas State, they've had problems. Not going to be easy. It will be a trek the rest of the season. And obviously they need 4 more wins to even get bowl eligibility. Before the year, some were thinking 8+ wins. That seems hard now. You got to at least get 6 for me, or that Neil Brown hot seat would really rev up the engines despite this win. But this is nice and certainly keeps those good vibes that maybe you felt against Townsend. This is an FBS team. It's not doing it to Townsend. But yeah, you're still got to factor in Virginia Tech is not that good. West Virginia was horrible penalty-wise early in the game. Dumb mistakes galore. Drop passes. JT did look off early, but then he certainly fixed himself. The defense played really, really well against the run, especially basically stymieing Virginia Tech completely on the ground in that first half. So that was one of my keys actually to this game. And that is control the turnovers and take care of the football. They didn't really do that early, but then did it later on. And then they got one late, which sealed the deal. And then also establish the run early in your favor. You saw CJ Donaldson, you saw Tony Mathis, etc. And then also stop the run, which they were able to do with that defensive line that struggled against Kansas, again, a more mobile quarterback than Grant Wells, but feasted in this game. So that makes you feel good maybe about the defense. Maybe that's kind of where I might go commentary-wise that I'll throw up here on the site in the coming days. But in general, you gotta look at competition all the time in college football. And this Virginia Tech team is just not good. I don't know what we're trying to do here. I mean, Virginia Tech is not good. They're not going to be ranked. They might not make a bowl game. Again, I poo-pooed the win last year over a 15th ranked Virginia Tech team, and I was right because they kept on losing the rest of the season. They weren't good. I think this team's worse. New coach, new regime, got to give them time. This team's worse, even with Grant Wells. Okay. Anything else here as we do wrap things up in the chat? We kind of have talked about whether or not, obviously, this is a big win. I wouldn't say it's a big win. I would say it was a necessary win, and it's a good win that makes you feel good. Okay. We're still doing this. Unbelievable here. We have an entire chat where Tech fans are trying to tell me that West Virginia is not a rival to them. I'm confused why the game was played, guys. I don't know why your school decided to get on the phone with West Virginia to play this game, because FYI, this was no charity service. West Virginia has not been great the last couple of years. They've been better than Tech, and they won both games. So if that was the plan for Tech, boy, did it fail. My God, that would have been an awful plan. If that's what the plan was for Tech, to play this as a charity service, to get some wins, to shut up West Virginia fans, to then later on say it wasn't a rival, and that was a plan, my God. That would be great. Yeah, there literally is a trophy. Thank you. It's called the Black Diamond Trophy. This exists here. I'm sure there's some trolling here, but also, my God, there were some takes and conversation I had to have. But at the end of the day, and I do want to take these wherever the chat goes. So this isn't traditional talk show. I got to be exactly perfect all the way through. I want to make these where the chat goes for these post-game shows or whenever I do a live chat. And if you guys want to have Troll City, okay. But again, that can't make you feel good if you feel that way, because back-to-back years and another win for West Virginia. This one a convincing win. Last year didn't really make you feel that good. But again, I wouldn't say this is a big win for Neil Brown. I would say this is a necessary win for Neil Brown, a good win, and it provides good vibes. But Tech, not good. you got to see what West Virginia does when that schedule gets harder, and they will play good teams. They will play ranked teams. If you just drop all those ranked games, drop most of the conference games, and you have this to talk about, even though maybe you should have beat Pitt, maybe you should have beat Kansas, certainly should have beat the Jayhawks, what are you going to feel? So, again, we're just going to wrap things up there and not going to have any more conversation on whether or not a game with a trophy that is a border war is a rivalry. Guys, let's not be ridiculous. Nonetheless, the Mountaineers do win it 33-10 and eventually shellac the Hokies there, certainly in the second half after the offense finally clicked. The defense finally forced the turnover and got an interception that then was a pick six to seal the deal. And then do what they had to do on the ground, do what they had to do with the receivers. The defense, you give them the game ball, really, because they really stopped Virginia Tech in exactly what they wanted to do on the ground to establish Grant Wells, who didn't get established, couldn't get the running game in front of him. And then he totally was off his foot, just totally misfiring, mentally out of it, because maybe he really wanted to beat West Virginia off personal reasons, being from Charleston, West Virginia. But regardless, it didn't happen for Virginia Tech. And I will answer this as closing things out, kind of where I started and kind of the theme of the day here. Does this buy Neil Brown more time? So that'll again be addressed here throughout the coming week on the site there, WV Sports Now. I don't think this by itself buys him any time. But as much as I've been critical of Neil Brown and said he had to be on the hot seat entering this year because it's year 4, you're saying trust the climb. You got to at least win what you did. You got to at least try to maybe progress the program. You have a better QB, still some veteran pieces on this team despite some holes there, and your team shouldn't be worse than a year ago. And that's kind of how it felt, certainly after the Kansas game, which the worst loss of the Neil Brown era certainly was that loss on that Saturday night in Morgantown against Kansas. When you're a 13.5 point favorite, even Kansas being better, that's a really, really bad loss that'll still be hard to get over. But I never thought Neil Brown would really be fired. So I have always said he should be in the hot seat. If they didn't win that many games the rest of the season, certainly if they missed a bowl game the rest of the season, I would have let him go. I would say that. However, when you have a buyout that's almost $17 million, you have a really good recruiting class coming in next year, a really good recruiting class 2 years from now. He's doing well recruiting, which is almost more important than anything else as a college coach, and doing well recruiting to his credit while the program's been down. It's kind of been floundering under him. First year under Dana, or first year under him after Dana, the cupboard was bare. I get it. Year 0 didn't really count. They didn't do anything. They were bad. You have the bowl win. People get excited. You're climbing maybe. Then you drop off, and it was really bad last year. You finished 6-7, a mediocre bowl loss. It really felt like they only won 3 games, though. They were just that bad, and the offense was boring, really, under Jarrett Dagey at times. You couldn't put points on the board. This is at least a much more exciting West Virginia team for sure. They've squandered some games they should have won. They could be 4-0 right now. That's the Neil Brown story of his 4 years. A lot of these games have been close. He's lost a lot of close games. And if he would have won all those games, instead of being 18-20, I believe right now, is his record, so still under 500 in the 4 years, he could be 30 and something, honestly. I mean, there's that many games that have been close, maybe more realistically 25, 26. I honestly do. There's about 4 or 5 games in these 4 years he could have won. Could have had eight wins last year, maybe instead of the 6, a couple games that were close year before. Could even have been another game this year, could have the 2 more. You're going to lose games like that. You're not going to win them all, but they just have been bad losses. Certainly the Kansas loss this year. But I don't think even though he would have been on the hot seat for me, I don't think he was ever going to be fired at the end of this season, mostly because of the buyout and the recruiting class coming in. If this didn't happen and he really sucked the rest of this year and next year, then nothing else would have mattered. They would have eventually had to move on because you got to have some respectability. But again, this game by itself buying him more time, I don't see it because, again, Virginia Tech, not a good team. They do suck. If West Virginia loses out the rest of the way and you have this win, it's not going to do anything for his time. It's not going to make you feel good about the program. It's not going to do anything at all. You got to see what this team does against really good teams in conference play the rest of the season. If they take where they were 1-2 after those really bad losses to open up the year despite the Townsend game, and that's an FCS team, and then you somehow crawl at least into a quality bowl game, you at least get to 6, 7, maybe 7 wins. You do something like that, that'll show that Neil Brown really got some cojones and things are happening here. And obviously it's tough to do that. So 4 more wins are not guaranteed. I do think he gets 6 wins and they're a bowl team. He's not getting fired, even for me. He'd be back next year. You have the recruiting class, you have the buyout. Who else are you really going to get unless you promote Graham Harold or something like that? And then you see what happens from there on out. But it has to fix. You have to, it's a results-based business. You have to be better. You have to win more coming up, and we'll see. But this game by itself, it's not like Virginia Tech's a top 10, top 15 team. This isn't going to do it enough by itself if you don't get it done the rest of the way. So if he wins on the road against Texas, where do we go from there? Again, I think that would be a better win than this. That would be on the road. That'd be a conference game. You really need those because of the Kansas loss. They played real close against Bama. But this isn't Texas of 06 with Vince Young here, by the way, either. This isn't a national victory. They're still kind of trying to be back, but they're now a ranked team for me. And they had that close game against Bama, took them to the limit. So on the road, that would be a bigger win than this because Virginia Tech is just not good for me. Again, yeah, he's been a hell of a recruiter, but it's been decisions, it's been X's and O's, it's been situations in games that have been his problems, and it is a result-based business. You got to win more and get bigger wins and not as many bad losses as Neil Brown has had. And I like the man. I think he's really, really a nice guy, and he's done a lot of great things for the program that I have said ad nauseum countless times, whether it be connecting to alums, to fans, to the administration, randomly showing up places to sign autographs. Dana Holgorsen never would have done that. Making sure alums and former players are welcome there, talking about the history, being friends with Don Nalen, all of these things, getting himself on national TV and wanting to do those spots when Dana Holgorsen would turn them down because they were an annoyance to him. I get it. He's done all the right things to promote and be the statesman and the leader of the program. That's what you want. He's like a politician there. He would get votes if you're running for office. Got to win more. 2-2. This is a good win. Virginia Tech not that good, though. So how big of a win is it? You got to see the rest of the season. But he's not going anywhere. He won't be fired at the end of this year unless you really don't win anything else. The buyout's too big. We'll see next year, though, how much that seat is hot, depending on the rest of this season. So I'm going to wrap it up from there. And that will do it. West Virginia does win this 33-10 as they successfully defend the Black Diamond Trophy, getting the win in Blacksburg. West Virginia's first trip to Blacksburg since 2004 is a win for the Mountaineers in convincing fashion, 33-10. JT Daniels, he owns the Black Diamond Trophy. Neil Brown owns 2 of them. Dante Stills owns yet another Black Diamond Trophy. But how good of a win is it? How good is Virginia Tech really? We got to wait and see the rest of this season for the West Virginia Mountaineers. But on this night, Country Roads defeats Enter Sandman as the Mountaineers defeat the Virginia Tech Hokies and keep the Black Diamond Trophy in Morgantown.